Hi everyone, my name is Genevieve Antono and I am the president of the Columbia Pre-Law Society. Thank you so much for coming out to our first ever peer mentorship meeting. Tonight's meeting is titled, Launching Your Pre-Law Career, What Undergraduates Can Be Doing Now to kind of, gain legal experience and build your professional network. And so as some of you may know, our club is a pretty busy one. We run, 10 to 15 events every year. We've got, your typical LSAT and law school admissions workshops. We've got, panels with corporate lawyers. We've got our conference, Lollapalooza. I'm not sure how many of you went to that. Events with judges, public interest lawyers. We've got networking events with alumni. So there's one coming up in April. You might have seen the listserv email about that. And we also have a mentorship program with Columbia Law School students. So we're a pretty busy club, and we do a lot with lawyers and law students. But one piece of feedback that we have gotten from you guys, and especially from the freshmen and the sophomores who are in our journal body, is that although you love hearing from these really amazing lawyers and judges, they sometimes feel a bit too far ahead or too advanced. And so that is kind of the spirit behind tonight's seminar. The hope is that you'll find it helpful to hear from a fellow undergraduate who is a peer or just 1 or 2 years ahead of you. So to give you a sense of my background and my quote-unquote qualifications so far, I've done 5 pre-law internships during the last 3 years here at Columbia. During my freshman fall, I was a public affairs intern at the New York State Unified Court System. And then the summer between my freshman and sophomore years, I worked as a graduate recruitment, so HR intern at an international law firm called Clifford Chance. And then in my 3rd year, I spent the whole year as a work-study student at the Columbia Law School's clerkships office. So I helped law students apply for clerkships. And then in the spring of my sophomore year, I also worked at the New York State the New York State Attorney General's office in their Criminal Enforcement and Financial Crimes Bureau. So this was helping the prosecution as an undergrad intern. And then last summer, I worked in-house at the in-house legal department of a global Fortune 500 company called CK Hutchison Holdings. This was in London. And so I've done those 5 internships so far, and I will be also doing a legal-related internship this summer. My what do you call it, rising senior summer, and I will be a summer legal analyst at the Blackstone Group here in New York City. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have done a fair bit of pre-law experiences, and the hope is that I'll be able to share a few helpful tips and strategies that you'll hopefully find interesting. All right, but before we dive into tips and strategies, right? I wanted to spend a bit of time just thinking about this idea of a pre-law career, because the thing is, a pre-law internship is not necessary at all in order to get into law school. Because if you're trying to get into law school, the only 2 things that matter are 1, your LSAT score, and 2, your GPA. So if you are a real life, Elle Woods, who has a 4.0 in fashion merchandising from UCLA, and you aced the history of polka dots, and you have a 179 in your LSAT, chances are in real life, you're gonna have a good shot at getting into Harvard. If anyone didn't get that, that was a Legally Blonde reference. And so, basically, you guys may also have heard from a lot of the law school admissions officers who visit Columbia from time to time, and they often say that they are not impressed by candidates who check all the boxes. They're not impressed by the debaters who major in political science and have done a couple of legal internships, because they meet so many people who have this profile. It's kind of boring for them, right? And so that's one thing that we should all be keeping in mind, that pre-law internships will not help you get into law school. So if there's anything else that you love and you're an undergraduate, you are like a musical genius with a YouTube channel and you want to invest in that, do that. If you're an athlete, you love your sport, spend time on that. Whatever it is that you love, environmental activism, theater, whatever. College is the time to be pursuing all of that. So at this point, you guys are probably like, all right, that is great. Pre-law internships are useless, so why does this workshop even exist, right? Why are we having this? So about a year ago, I wrote this article for the Miss JD blog, and it's called Internspired, Why Pre-Law Students Shouldn't Be Talking About Law School Admissions Yet. And so if you guys kind of Google that, kind of Google my name and Miss JD, that article will pop up. And in that article, I argue that instead of thinking about how do I get into law school, it is actually important for pre-law students to be thinking kind of beyond that, trying to understand the legal profession before you even start thinking about whether or not you should go to law school. Because it's only when you understand the legal profession and what it is that lawyers actually do that you can take a moment and pause and kind of look inward and be like, is this really what I want to do for myself? And right now, the reality is that no one, and absolutely no one, should be going to law school, just because it's prestigious or because they don't know what to do with their liberal arts degree, or because they want the hope of $160,000 kind of big law job immediately after graduation. Like, these are all terrible reasons to kind of go to law school. Because the reality is that post 2008, the legal market has been terrible. It's really law school is really expensive, and a lot of people, if you don't go into a top law school, will not actually get jobs. And a lot of these people who actually do manage to get jobs, they find out for the first time at their job that they actually hate it, and that it's not a good fit for their personality, but they're stuck because they have taken on a lot of law school debt, and they've gotten used to a higher standard of living, and so this is why we kind of get the kind of like depressed alcoholic lawyer kind of trope, right? And for me personally, this reality of how expensive law school is and how terrible the legal market is exactly the reason why, if you are thinking about going to law school at all, that pre-law internships are extremely important, because basically it is only by spending time in court, only by spending time talking to lawyers, only by spending time working with thick, dry legal documents that you're going to realize whether or not law is a good fit for your personality. And I think this kind of applies for everything in our lives and in our careers, right? You got to try it, and then you're going to know for sure whether or not this is a good path for you. So for me personally, I was never one of those kids who knew at age 7 that I wanted to be a lawyer. Far from it. When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a dentist, and the reason for that was because my dentist had this kind of like entire shelf of toys up in her clinic. So I'd be up in the chair, kind of like looking at the shelf of toys and being like, I want to be a dentist. They have toys. And then in middle school, I wanted to be a millionaire, as if millionaire was a job title, right? And then sometime later, I wanted to be a teacher. I actually applied to Columbia with the full intention of applying to the Barter's education program and kind of doing that alongside my major. But the summer before I started school at Columbia, I actually spent my summer working at a summer camp with actual children. And I realized that it was way too hard for me, right? So I was like, oh, okay, I don't really want to do. And so when I was a freshman, I then applied for this kind of public affairs internship at the state courts. And to be perfectly honest, at the time, I was equally interested in the kind of public affairs communications bit of the internship and the kind of legal bit of the internship. In my kind of perspective, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to learn as much as I can, and if I don't like it, fine, I'll get transferable skills out of it, right? And so that kind of was my approach during my first pre-law internship. And frankly, it was a great learning experience. I got to spend a lot of time in criminal court, family court, housing court, talking to a lot of judges, and just learning a lot about the legal system. But even then, at the end of my internship, I still was not 100% sold that law was going to be the right path for me. During the course of my internship, I was actually invited to a Christmas party at a judge's chambers, and at that party, I met the most miserable lawyers I have ever kind of encountered. Person after person would come up to me and be like, oh, you're an undergrad. don't go to law school. I hate my work, I hate my life. And I was a freshman, and so I was like, this isn't the league. I don't think this is gonna be the path for me. But at the same time, I was still intrigued. I was still kind of interested. I felt that there was something there. And so I thought to myself, okay, I will do one more legal internship, right? And I will, give it another shot, and I'll see whether or not I like it. And so I actually got the graduate recruitment HR internship at Clifford Chance that summer between my freshman and sophomore years. And so basically, at that point, I thought that corporate law would never be my thing. I mean, like, even the words corporate law, blah, right? It's like, how soul-sucking and boring can anything sound? But while I was at Clifford Chance, while I was doing that internship, I actually had two aha moments. I was at a practice area presentation with an associate, and she, was talking about funds, and she spoke with such passion and such genuine interest that at the end of it, I was like, okay, there's something here. I want to be able to talk about my job with as much passion as you're talking about yours. My second aha moment was actually during an interview. Not mine. I was in HR, so basically I got to sit in on over 20 interviews where law students, this was in Hong Kong, so where the law students were applying for full-time jobs with the law firm. And basically, sometime over the course of watching 20 interviews, I started feeling like, you know what, I want to be on that other side of the table. I think that I can do what you guys are doing, and I think I can probably be good at it. So I had those two aha moments. I was like, this might be for me. And I spent that summer kind of, talking to a lot of their lawyers as well. And this is very important to me. The lawyers were very busy, of course, but they were also very nice and very balanced, and they seemed pretty happy. And so I was like, happy lawyers, they exist, right? And so I started learning a lot from these lawyers about their different practice areas. I got to hear about, like capital markets, got to hear about corporate finance, funds, litigation, just kind of hearing about their work across the practice areas. And I started feeling like that the more they told me, the more I wanted to learn. And so I felt at that point that I finally found an area. I finally found my thing. So I kind of went into Clifford Chance thinking like, you know what, I'm going to check out this corporate law thing, and I'm just going to just so I can cross it off my list, just like I've crossed out being a teacher and a dentist, right? But as it turned out, it was something that I was genuinely interested in, and I have spent kind of the time after that kind of delving deeper into the kind of corporate transactional side of law. And so I guess what I want to say during this part is that finding our career, finding what is a good fit for our personalities is going to be more of a journey than anything else. We're going to try different things and be like, oh, this is a good fit for me, this isn't, and it's going to be an internal kind of process of self-discovery as well. And so it's important, I think, to kind of go into your pre-law career not thinking about how do I check boxes, how do I build my resume, how do I, just kind of look good on paper. It's got to go beyond that. It's got to be looking for something that is a good fit. And if throughout this process of exploration you realize that law really isn't a good fit for you, that's fine, because then as a pre-law student you would have figured out that law is not a good fit for you before you've spent $200,000 in law school tuition. So that's kind of like my personal philosophy on pre-law careers. I hope I haven't kind of been too negative and kind of like scared anyone off. But I think it's important to kind of give that sort of like dose of realism about the state of the legal market. But that aside, right? So let's say, okay, you know what everything is like, and you buy my argument that we should be delving in and learning as much as we can. What are some tips and strategies for us to kind of start doing well? So I've got 10 things laid out. Tip number 1 is learn how to persuasively answer the question, why do you want to be a lawyer? So as the president of the Pre-Law Society, I actually get a lot of I meet a lot of undergrads, and sometimes I ask them, so why are you interested in law? And more often than you would think, I get answers like, oh, my mom is a lawyer, or oh, I watched Legally Blonde when I was 8. And that is fine to tell me, because I am not a recruiter and I'm not offering these guys jobs or internships. But you can see why a recruiter would want an answer with more depth, right? You compare the kind of like answers, oh, I'm interested in law because my mom is a lawyer and that was kind of interesting, versus, oh, I'm interested in law because I did this internship at a Fortune 500 company. I got to work closely with my supervisor. She let me edit from her markups, many kinds of contractual documents, such as framework services agreements and statements of work, and non-disclosure agreements. And I found out through that process that I actually liked working with details, and I enjoyed the legal side of law and kind of more specific things like that. And so that's kind of one thing that I think is that this is why it's tip number 1, right? Why are you interested in law? The tip number 2 is actually come to Pre-Law Society events and practice networking. So we have a lot of speakers come to campus, and a lot of the time we see the undergraduates kind of sit quietly throughout the event, and then at the end of the event they kind of just leave, right? And basically that I think is a real shame. When we kind of bring in speakers to undergrads on like a silver platter, almost, and bring them to campus, right? I think the least that we can do for our own careers is to kind of like stay back, talk to the people after the event, and ask them, if they have a business card, and if they don't have a business card, be like super proactive, be like, can I have your email address, have your notebook and pen ready, right? And write to them, say, thank you, I had a great time listening to you today, and say at the end of it, you feel like you want to, ask them for coffee a few months later, or even just immediately. But the point is, you've made that connection. So that's tip number 1. Kind of just make use of the resources on campus and our events. Tip number 3 is to really take ownership of your own learning, even if it means going off campus. I know this is really hard to do because we are all, in the Columbia bubble, and it's so comfortable here. But one thing that I actually personally love doing is gate crashing events at law firms and also at bar associations. And so there are a lot of these kind of great panels and conferences going on all the time. And I think it's important for us to, take ownership of our own learning and to go out to these things. I mean, in recently, I've attended, the Global Law Week, the New York City Global Law Week, which is kind of like a lot of different law firms have the panels on international law, corporate international law. I gate crashed Columbia Law School's private sector symposium recently. There are things like the Miss JD conference. There are all sorts of different events. And so the thing is, as undergraduates, we'll go to these events, and we may not catch everything. We may not understand everything. In fact, I kind of go into these events and I'm like, okay, 50% of that just kind of went over my head. I have no idea what's going on. But you're gonna leave that event with the 50% that you did understand. And that is something that you're gonna know leaving the room that you did not know coming in. And so through this process, I've just learned a lot of random things. Like at Global Law Week, I learned that New York is the largest legal market in the world. I didn't know that. I've learned things like corporations in the US are usually incorporated in Delaware. Random information, but interesting. Learned things like magic circle firms, which are the leading law firms in the UK, don't like being called magic circle firms anymore because they want to compete with US firms. So they're no longer magic circle firms, they're leading international law firms. Kind of really random things like that. But what this does in the long run, as you kind of go to different events and you kind of learn a lot of different things, is that it helps you build content. And I think that because I have invested so much time and so much effort into learning about the legal industry, this has really given me kind of an advantage in recruiting, because when interviewers are talking to me for my junior year internship and they're asking me why am I interested in law, what have I done so far, I can actually back it up with actual things that I know. And so that's one. That's tip number 3, right? Really take ownership of your learning. Number 4, learn how to stalk people online and learn how to write nice cold emails to them. So I guess as Columbia students, we have heard this probably a lot from the Center for Career Education and other kind of advisors, right? You've got to learn how to write cold emails, learn how to ask for informational interviews. But one thing that I think is lacking in terms of the emphasis is how well-researched and polite we should be as undergrads in writing those emails. Personally, I get a lot of random cold emails from other undergrads, and sometimes they're a bit too random. I'll get one sentence, no, hi Jeannie, dear Jeannie, just kind of hey, I can't go to any pre-law society events, could you put me in touch with a lawyer? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna delete the email. So I think, this is obviously a very dramatic example, but what I'm trying to emphasize here is that when we are reaching out to lawyers, people we don't actually know, none of them owe us any favors. And so we wanna be polite, introduce ourselves properly. I know this sounds really basic, but I just wanna hammer this home, right? And say why we're interested in reaching out to them, that sort of thing. So you guys may be wondering right now, all right, so we want to write these cold emails. Where do we find these guys, right? So one thing that I actually enjoy, one thing that I found really helpful, is LinkedIn's alumni pages. It's www.linkedin.com/alumni. And what this is, it's an entire kind of database where you can basically sort people on LinkedIn based on what city they're in, what industry they're in, and this is kind of a great place to kind of be where are all the interesting people who I want to reach out to. That's kind of one source that I think has been really helpful. Another one is websites, law firm websites, right? Because these websites actually have profiles of their lawyers. They tell you what practice areas they're in, tell you their educational background, and they put up their emails online. So that's kind of a good source of if you want to reach out to lawyers and talk to them, law firm websites. As a kind of general tip, if you reach out to Columbia alumni and tell them that, hey, I'm a Columbia student, that usually gives you a higher rate of response than if someone has no connection to you at all. If you can find a sort of connection, you were from the same hometown, et cetera, kind of do that. So really be proactive in reaching out. Tip number 5, personal branding and social media. So we reach out to these lawyers and we're like, hey, can we have coffee? And then, so just as you've kind of found them online, they're gonna Google you right back. And the important thing to note is that if there is nothing professional of you online, or nothing about you online at all, that's gonna look really kind of weird and suspicious, because they'll be like, oh, I don't know who this person is, do I even want to reply to this email? So I think it's really important for us to kind of establish a strong online brand, just so people who we're reaching out to know who we are. And so all the basics, LinkedIn, everyone I hope has a LinkedIn already, just set up the basics, what schools you've gone to. It doesn't have to be too fancy, but that should exist. Other things that you should be looking at, you could be looking at, would be Twitter. I actually really like Twitter because you can really just follow different lawyers and kind of get to follow what they're up to, but also law firms. Law firms tweet their achievements, and so this is kind of a segue to what I was talking about earlier about kind of learning content, right? So if you follow a few law firms and you're what deals have they been working on over the last year, over time, and this is just kind of 1 or 2 tweets a day, but you can really get a sense for their work and what they're up to. So Twitter is a good one. And another piece of advice would be to also start contributing to websites such as Miss JD. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been on the Miss JD blog, but it's basically they're contributors, people can contribute to the blog, and they actually have space for pre-law students to also contribute blog posts. and men also can participate in the Miss JD blog. And basically what this does is it plugs you immediately into a network of lawyers, practicing lawyers who are involved in the Miss JD network. So kind of like try to get involved online. So a couple of things here. I'm sorry if it was a bit disorganized, but exist online so that people can, stalk you right back. Use social media in your education, learn about what law firms are up to, and also use it to kind of widen your network and kind of strengthen your personal brand. So look out for websites like Miss JD. Also, of course, the personal branding, also think about things that are not just online, but also in real life. So if you're attending, starting to kind of like what I said, gate crash events, and you're meeting lawyers, you start to think about things like, do I want to have a business card? I know it sounds kind of weird for undergrads to have business cards, but when everyone's exchanging business cards, you kind of get into the Pokemon card game as well, right? You want to have one too as well. So it's kind of things like that. Just be super proactive. Tip number 6, make use of the career resources on campus. I am always really surprised when I hear a lot of people say, oh, CCE is so useless, they never help me, blah, 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 blah. Because it has been great in my own life. My 3 summer internships so far have all been, gotten through CCE. My first 2 at a law firm, in-house, were through the CEO program. They changed rules now, so you guys can't do it twice anymore. But I managed to do it twice. And my upcoming internship with Blackstone was also offered through on-campus interviewing. So there is just a lot at CCE. Really be kind of looking out for those opportunities, both in America and overseas as well. I know that if you're in Columbia College, there's things like CASIT, the alumni program, where you get to work with judges, things like that. So really make use of the resources on campus. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of informational interviewing, networking, CCE will be able to give you all the basics that you'll need to learn. So kind of their par half hours and things like that. So yes, make use of the resources on campus. Number 7, never just send a cover letter and resume. So kind of a bit of a backstory with regard to how I got my internship at Clifford Chance. So it was like I